We have some new updates regarding Sony's commercial plans for the latter portion of 2020, and new rumblings are suggesting that they might not be a part of E3 2020. Microsoft is actually proceeding as if Sony won't be, so that is some very interesting information. Also, analysts have chimed in as to when they expect the PlayStation 5 to be unveiled, but we'll go over that also. The big talking point right now about E3 2020 is whether or not Sony will actually attend the event after it skipped the show in 2019. Now, I didn't think the idea of them skipping E3 2019 was that big of a deal, just because we had already seen a lot of gameplay of their major titles. The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima was still a ways out, and Death Stranding, I don't think they were itching to show off a lot of footage of that. And can you really center a show around Death Stranding? And we're talking about a giant E3 show. And you weren't ready to do your big unveil of the PlayStation 5 stuff, so it didn't really make a lot of sense for Sony to be at E3 2019, and it made complete sense to take off that year. However, the point can also be made that they took off to kind of gain a little bit more control over their reveals. E3 is such a wild event, and there's so many things going on. Not only is Microsoft also there taking up a lot of headlines, you got Ubisoft, you got EA, you got so many other publishers and developers trying to get their games announced, trying to get their games over, that for Sony, if they did take a step back and they decided, hey, we're just gonna focus on creating our own events where all of the focus is on PlayStation, I don't think that's the worst idea in the world. It would be a bummer, because E3 is that event that it really hits pop culture. And it's that time where you literally hear everybody talking about video games. Even people that aren't super into video games will be on social media talking about video games, looking at the new games. Maybe they're not necessarily the people that are gonna buy these games day one or anything like that, but they're at least watching it, they're looking at it, and usually they're rather impressed by things like the visuals. And for Sony to not have that platform, that would be a little bit of a disappointment. Well, it's interesting that Xbox is apparently planning for their E3 2020 press conference on the basis that PlayStation will not be at the event. This rumor comes from VGC, citing unnamed sources. The publication, which has provided plenty of reliable information in the past, writes, quote, "We understand that Xbox's events team is working under the assumption that PlayStation will not be at E3 2020 and upping its plans accordingly." Now, what's even more interesting, there are plenty of arguments for and against Sony being at E3. Personally speaking, I think it would be a very big misfire if they didn't show up at E3 and they made that regular occurrence. Again, I do understand from a Sony standpoint why they would want that control and why they would want all the attention surrounding their big reveals, but that spirit of competition that E3 offers really elevates everyone. And really, Sony and PlayStation are one of the standouts of E3 every year. If you want to go of that notion, okay, we want to have all the headlines to ourselves, well, Sony is usually dominating in the headlines, and I want to say the general consensus most years is that PlayStation does win out on the press conference war battles. I know it's a little bit biased and fanboy wars or whatever the case may be, but usually Sony has really good showings and they do dominate in the headlines and they get a lot of traction. Usually it's a lot of their games that are the biggest games, that are the most viewed games. So that idea doesn't make complete sense to me. And going back to last year, by this time last year, Sony had already ruled out an appearance at E3 2019, so they had already gotten the ball rolling on that. But as of right now, it's yet to comment on its plans for this year's convention at all, so there's still a possibility they might be at E3. Publishers usually start announcing their E3 schedule soon. To give you guys an idea, around February, March, and April, so we probably will be hearing something rather soon. I imagine that Sony is gearing up for their own PlayStation event, and remember that for the PlayStation 4, they designed and crafted their own PlayStation 4 reveal event, and that's how they got all the information about the PlayStation 4 initially rolled out, and then they parlayed that with even more reveals at E3. That is the game plan that I personally would go with. Once again, get a lot of that information coming out in that February, early March conference, much like you did with the PlayStation 4, and then hold an E3 conference where you announce a lot of the nitty-gritty details, a lot of the other features, a lot more games, whatever the case may be. E3 offers a platform to do a lot of good. And also, if you are absent from E3 and you're entirely giving Microsoft that platform to be the only major publisher and console manufacturer there, man, you are giving them a lot to have a killer show. And if Xbox is gonna turn up their own conference because they know Sony is not gonna be there, and it's an opportunity for them to really drive home that this next Xbox is gonna be a beast of a machine with some compelling games, well, suddenly then for Microsoft and Xbox, E3 becomes an even more powerful promotional event, even more so than years in the past. In 2019, they had the show to themselves, but they didn't announce the next Xbox or anything like that. They showed off that video, but it really wasn't what gamers were looking for. If we're going into E3 2020, Sony's absent and Microsoft and Xbox can just come out, show off the console, show off a quality price point, and then announce a litany of high-quality games, well, that would just be incredible for them from a promotional side of things. Well, then the argument can also be made, what if Sony waits for the E3 hangover to end, and then they hold their own conference, and then they announce a lot of other things? It's going to be very interesting in terms of how they roll information out, because I think both Microsoft and Sony learned a lot from the pitfalls of last generation. I think Microsoft had to have learned more just because their rollout was just such a train wreck, but Sony also, hey, it'd be better for them to adapt before tragedy does strike like it happened with Microsoft in last generation. Maybe they've got some very quality ideas, and hey, for them breaking records on things like Instagram with logo reveals, I would be really foolish to question them right now, but I do think it would be a big disappointment if they don't show up at E3. Also, a lot of analysts are chiming in on when they think the PlayStation 5 is going to be officially unveiled. I know everybody knows it's in the works, and Sony has unveiled the logo and things like that, and a lot of the information about the console as well, but kind of an unveiling that maybe we don't see the console, but we do see some games, we get a bigger idea of what it is and the general overarching narrative of the PlayStation 5 and whatever the case may be on that. Well, VGC noted, on January 31st, 2013, Sony Interactive Entertainment published a video on its YouTube channel. The computer-generated showpiece featured a swirling cyclone concluding after 33 seconds with the PlayStation logo and the date, February 20th, 2013. Now, obviously, that is when the big PlayStation meeting event occurred that unveiled the PlayStation 4. Soon after the video's publication, media and investors received invites to the 2013 PlayStation meeting, where the PlayStation 4 was officially unveiled. Now, if I recall correctly, the PlayStation 4 console itself actually wasn't unveiled at this event. I believe they saved that unveiling for E3 itself. Just something interesting to note, and this is exactly how VGC expects the PlayStation 5's unveiling to happen, without warning and with FBI levels of control. The consensus among insiders is that the PlayStation meeting is again likely to take place in February. There are a few reasons this is likely to happen. Firstly, the timing is convenient. It gives PlayStation's marketing team and PR teams a traditional 9 months to sell the console and precedes key B2B meetings planned for PAX East and GDC in late February and March, so to get the ball rolling now would make a lot of sense. It's likely we'll know a lot more about PlayStation 5 before GDC in March, as Sony looks to increase its conversations with partners to ensure a strong launch year lineup. Secondly, independent industry events have many advantages over E3 events in terms of exposure due to the fact that they draw in the undivided attention of the games market. At E3, PlayStation would be directly measured against Xbox and other rival platforms, but it's pretty tough to lose at a standalone event. As I mentioned earlier, that is one line of thinking. The other line of thinking would be that rising tides lift all boats, and that competition, that air of competitiveness elevates both Microsoft, Xbox, Sony, and PlayStation. I think that is a legitimate way of looking at things, but hey, if Sony does find more success in standalone events where they are the stars and they are the center of attention, then I understand why they would go this route over, waiting until E3. Obviously, they're not going to wait until E3, but more so for going E3 altogether. Sony announced PlayStation Vita in 2011, PlayStation 4 in 2013, and PlayStation 4 Pro in 2016 at standalone PlayStation events, and we see little reason to doubt it'll do the same for PlayStation 5. Chris Dring, the publisher of leading industry site GamesIndustry.biz, told VGC that he agrees PlayStation 5 is likely to be publicly unveiled by the time GDC and PAX East open. In comparison to Xbox, PlayStation was very quiet in 2019, teasing bits of information about its next console, but keeping most of the details to itself. As a result, anticipation for the full PlayStation 5 reveal is at a fever pitch, and even mundane announcements like the console name and logo are generating unusual levels of attention. PlayStation will break cover soon and is starting to do so already with its small CES reveal, the first of many appearances. PlayStation is meeting with indie developers at PAX East next month, and GDC will be a major moment for it to bring more studios on board. It's likely we'll know a lot more about PS5 before then, as Sony looks to increase its conversations with partners to ensure a strong launch year lineup. However, when it comes to exact day one release slate and pricing, that will likely be left to E3 or a similar event at the very earliest. And again, the question will go back to, will they be at E3? There's a lot of mystery surrounding that as well. But that is all the information. Again, thanks to Video Games Chronicle for the rundown on that. I'll leave a link to their article in the description box below because there's a lot of quality information on that. They also do cover the possibility about PlayStation at E3 2020, and a lot seem to be of the mindset that no, they won't be at E3, which again, I do think is a little bit of a misfire. But given PlayStation and more specifically the PS5's numbers on social right now, it's absolutely ridiculous, so I don't think it's going to be the end of the world, but just a little bit of a bummer if they aren't at E3. So that's going to conclude this video. Sound off with all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.